Hello, this is Kaylin Huntress, and I'm here to tell you about one of my favorite books, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. I really enjoyed reading this book so much that I savored it. I made sure not to read more than a chapter a night because I wanted it to last for a really long time. There's two reasons I love this book. It's about the timeless art of turning trials into triumph. And I like it first because it goes into the basics of Stoic thought. And it's a really practical manual for learning about how the Stoics looked at life, and with a lot of examples from historical figures applying these principles. But the other reason I love this book is because it's a really good manual for the mental shifts that you go through when you do parkour. Parkour, if you don't know, it's how do you define it? There's all sorts of argument about how to define it. It's basically moving through an urban environment and traversing obstacles with a minimal loss of momentum. The obstacles in parkour are what you do it for. You can't really do parkour in an open field because there's nothing to jump over, there's nothing to climb, there's nothing to traverse. It's the obstacles that make the journey worth living. And there's a mind shift that happens in parkour practitioners, and it's generally recognized in the community that after about a month, you start looking at the world differently. Because the obstacles that you see around you are no longer places where you go and stop. The obstacles are your opportunities. And so you begin to see around you, I could do that over there, I could do this over there. The obstacles they don't stop you, that's where you do your tricks. That's the way that you follow. And what Ryan Holiday's done here is he's a master storyteller, and he takes all these stories from historical figures and tells about the obstacles that they faced. He talks about Thomas Edison and Benjamin Franklin and Pericles and Franklin Roosevelt, and he goes into these in-depth stories that within a page it's just got you riveted. You know, he describes what astronauts go through when they go through a launch and how panicking is just suicide for them. But what they do is instead of avoid the obstacle of panic, they use that as the way they go forward because the obstacle is the way. Now, if you don't know anything about Stoic thought, this is a great primer. It's a great introduction. I first started reading about the Stoics in college when I went to St. John's in New Mexico, and I started really getting into philosophy. And the Stoics blew my mind. I had assumed that the Stoics were people who lived in burlap sacks and ate nothing but rice and hated their lives and dealt with it. That's kind of the first conception I had of what Stoics were, is that they could endure. But after I started reading the Stoics that he quotes in here, I understood that what the Stoics did is they trained themselves to look at life in a specific way that allowed them to not be hampered by their circumstances. And this was a big revelation for me when I realized that my circumstances didn't limit me, and I had no control over what circumstances I was facing. But what I did have control over was my reaction to circumstances. That's the only thing I really have control over. If I get stuck in traffic and I'm going to be late to this meeting, I can't control the traffic, but I can control whether or not I get upset. And if I get upset about traffic and I start yelling and screaming and it throws off the rest of my afternoon, that's my choice. But I can also make another choice to not be so upset. And when I realized that, my whole life changed. And Holiday goes through some of the changes that historical figures have gone through and how they changed their life by using and applying these principles. And he's divided the book into three sections. There's perception and action and will. And every chapter in these sections tells just a really dynamite story in the first page or two. And then it presents this Stoic lesson because of that story and refers back to it again and again, and uses that story as the framework of this lesson. And so it's a really powerful way of teaching you these principles. And so if you're looking for a good read, this is one of my favorite books to reread. I can just open it and flip open to a random chapter, and because it's not sequential, I can just say, okay, I'm going to read about George Washington in praise of the flank attack, or I'm going to read about Odysseus and perseverance. And you can just take this one little bite-sized nugget of wisdom and you get a great story, and you get some really good wisdom that goes with it. So that's why this is one of my favorite books of all time, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Go check it out.